Continuing with our Black History Month series, I'm Sam Brief, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Father Michael Pfleger, longtime pastor at St. Sabina Church right here in Chicago, and icon in the community. Father Pfleger, welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Good to be a part of it. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you, and you're such a commanding voice in the community. So I want to leave it a little open-ended to start. Tell me what Black History Month means to you.
Well, I think Black History Month's importance is the fact that sadly, it has the time to try to focus on African American and Black history that has been left out of history in America. So I think the importance of the month is getting education, trying to educate not only in schools and society in this country, to put into perspective the education that has been robbed, the history that's been robbed, the history that's been not just robbed, but lied on and mistold. So it begins, I think, for us, a possibility of a month to let truth be told, history to be told that has been ignored, forgotten, or lied about.
What's an aspect of history that's been forgotten for you?
Well, I think, you look at many of the textbooks in our education system, they'll have a chapter on up from slavery. And that becomes the history lesson of the African American or the Black community, when in fact, they're not teaching that Black community has come down from kings and queens. So if it's just focused on slavery and what's happened since slavery, and not on the richness, the culture, and the wonderful, wonderful history of kings and queens, and what Africa has given the world, taught the world, the inventors, the scientists. So it's been robbed in schools, and it's been robbed in society. So I think it is in a time when we can hear the real history, the full history, and unfortunately, I mean, to have to relegate that to a month of February is what's so crazy. I would love to see Black History Month to be pushing about the fact that it's time to make Black history part of American history. We learn semesters on European history and yet ignore African American history.
Right. And Father, you've been a part of Chicago's history in such a big way for the last few decades, including marching with MLK right here in Chicago way back when. So I'm curious if I could take you back to that day. Tell me your most vivid memory.
Well, it was two. I was a junior in high school. I had heard about Dr. King coming into Marquette Park over at 67th and between California and Kedzie. And well, I heard so much negativity about it in my community that I lived. When I asked my parents about this man, Martin Luther King Jr., they told me he's a good man. So I became more and more intrigued of why they were demonizing him so. I wasn't old enough or mature enough at that time to understand that's what they do when they're afraid of your truth and they can't argue with your message, so they attack the messenger. So myself and two of my friends rode our bikes over to Marquette Park to see this Martin Luther King Jr. And first we rode down 71st Street from Western going to California, and past what I never knew existed there was a Ku Klux Klan headquarters on 79th and Washtenaw. And there was all this racist language and swastika flag and all this on the side of the building, just 10 minutes from my house that I never knew about. When I asked my parents later why they never told me, they said they never drove down that street because they never wanted to expose my sister or I to that hate. So I saw that, and then go into Marquette Park, and one of my friends kept the bikes, and another friend of myself began to walk over to try to find where Dr. King and them were coming in the park, and saw two things that changed my life. Literally, one of them was hate, that I had never seen that like that before. The name calling, the turning over car, burning of cars, the throwing of cans and bottles, and seeing some people there that went to my church, lived in my neighborhood, and I'd never seen this side of them. And then, of course, getting over near closer into the park towards Kedzie, and then see Dr. King. And didn't realize at that time he had already been hit by a rock right as he entered the park at 67th and Kedzie. But watching him with all this hate and with all this this attacking of him, no response to it at all, and kept saying, reminding us that we have to live as brothers and sisters, that we are brothers and sisters. And I rode my bike home that day saying, this guy is either crazy or he has some kind of power I want to know about, and began to read everything I could up to 1966 on Dr. King.
As someone who's seen him in person, who's read so much literature about him and by him, imagine a young person in Chicago today, any race, any creed, some student. What should they learn most from MLK?
Well, I think, first of all, the most important thing is to learn who MLK was, who Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was, because America has done what it does so often with great leaders. It compromises them, it waters them down, it redefines them to make them something comfortable to this country. They make him as this, I have a dream speech man, and that's it. Dr. King, like the Jesus that he followed, was radical, and said radical teachings about justice and about truth. But our society doesn't teach that about him. So you got to go get it on your own. So if there's anything I think people should do about Dr. King is learn who he was and not who America tells you he is. Learn about the real man, his power, his courage, his determination for truth. People have to learn that. Otherwise, they don't know Martin Luther King Jr. They just know who America says he was.
What do you see now from the environment you were in at Marquette Park with MLK? What do you see now in today's environment of social justice, in protests we've seen in the last few years? What's most different about that environment? And I'm curious if anything is totally similar.
Oh, I think not only similar, consistent. I think, the society we live in today is very, very little change since 1968. It's just become a little more sophisticated, knows how to be a little more politically correct in doing the same thing. Somebody on WVON, one of their listeners, made a comment that I really love. They said, we are sometimes can be deceived by the illusion of inclusion. As if things are different because there's some inclusion. Sam, we've taken down statues of racist people. We've taken down the Confederate flag because of what it represents. But the spirit of that flag and the ideals of those races are alive and well in America today.
Father Pfleger, I'm coming to you from a college campus on the south side of Chicago, in a predominantly Black institution right here at Chicago State. Thinking about Chicago, which you've been in from the start, what do you see as the role of this campus in educating, in furthering the messages that are so important?
I think college campuses like Chicago State and others have an obligation to obviously first teach real history, to teach the truth, and to challenge their students to not how to fit in this world, but how to expose it for the dysfunctional and broken world we are, and how do we change it. We have to, the students have to, I think, understand, and college campus have to understand that we're not here to create more people to climb up the ladder of success. We're here, I think, to create and nourish young people to grow up and be agents of change, and to be courageous. We need more Colin Kaepernicks. We need more Brian Flores. We need more folks who are willing to stand up against the grain and the status quo. If America is ever going to be who she says she is, we need people to make her be that, and to force her and expose her and confront her and make her wrestle with the truth. So I think we need to raise up revolutionaries in our college campuses. The purpose of education is to learn, to educate, to know the truth. And I think our job on college campuses from Chicago State on is to make sure we're not raising up students to become tomorrow's leaders in a dysfunctional world, but rather to become tomorrow's revolutionaries for the new world.
Tomorrow's revolutionaries for the new world. I'm curious what you envision in that new world.
Well, first of all, a world where we really identify the DNA of this country. You know, got to remember, America was born on genocide. It was built on slavery, and continues to be a system to keep it as it is. So I think there needs to be revolutionaries that go into every field of corporate and education and government, and come in there and be a voice of the wilderness and a prophetic voice, and also into the churches and into faith communities, to Christian, Muslim, and Jews, which I think are also part of the problem of our society today. We need to come to invade society with truth, and invade society and every part of its fabric with becoming a society that is truly just, and that is truly brings the equality and the equity and the accessibility of every man, woman, and child, that eradicates cities like Chicago, where it's two cities. You know, there's the downtown on the north side and the south and the west side. The tale of two cities exists in many cities in this country, to decide we're going to fight this racism. We're going to eradicate this double standards. So I think it's coming in to change the very DNA of. But America needs a blood transfusion, as far as I'm considered, to get new blood of justice and truth.
Father Pfleger, thank you so much for your time, energy, your wisdom. Learned a lot from you in just a short interview. So thank you for inspiring us and for all you do.
Thank you so much, and continue to raise revolutionaries over at Chicago State.
Aye, aye, Captain. Thanks, Father.
Thank you, sir.